Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. Apologies that we were a minute or two late. I'm delighted to have Mr. Warwick Smith-Chandler with me this evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Warwick is the CEO of Perfect Laser, got an amazing CV. I think you told me once that you were the youngest person to ever have a listed company on the JSE. Is that correct? Did I hear correctly?
Yeah, June 8th, 1987, I was 29.
29 years old.
Yeah.
And what was the company?
Computer warehouse.
So, oh wow, okay, that's very cool. Well, I'm delighted. I think we're going to have a great conversation.
Thank you very much.
So, folks, what we want to talk about tonight is about the concept of teaching children entrepreneurship meaningfully. And I want to set the scene a little bit because I think what's important to understand in terms of where we need to go in teaching children is to understand how most schools currently do it. And I'm now talking about, the best case scenario, and I openly acknowledge that there's some schools where they do get this a bit more right than what I'm about to describe. But for the most part, and Warwick and I, we were talking about this earlier today, for the most part, what schools have is a market day, all right? And so they'll say to the kids, you get a table, you can decide what you want to sell at the table. Kids will arrive on the day and come to buy your stuff, okay? And there's quite a large focus usually on foodstuffs. People make sweets, or they bake cookies, or they have cupcakes, or that sort of thing. So that generally accounts for 50 to 60% of the fare because it's the easiest. And then you do get some creative types who will, I don't know, fold balloons or do something more creative in terms of what they, or go and make stuff to do this. I have quite an interesting anecdote about that a bit later in terms of when I was a young man and a young teacher. But then what the kids do on the day is they put out their wares, the others come along and they buy their stuff. Now, I think you can look at that from your experience and immediately see where the problems lie. So as a non-educator, what would you say to the teachers that are trying that approach to teaching entrepreneurship?
Well, the first thing is, I think that doing the market is just rehashing. It seems like it's rehashing an old idea with as little effort as possible.
Okay.
So you've got what would have been a cake stand and a coffee stand or whatever, and now you've added a little bit extra. But we're really missing out on a whole lot of things here. So that's point number one. The second thing is, I suppose that it's actually an incremental process. You're not going to get the design fundis coming out in the first attempt.
Correct.
Since when is entrepreneurship ever right? It's always, to use your name of the school, it's an evolving process.
Right.
And you really have to just prototype and try it and test it. And if it doesn't work, well, there's always the fate or the open day next term, and then try again.
Okay. And I think that's quite a credit. You raise so many interesting points for me as an educator. Okay. The first is the fear of failure. So one of the things that a high stakes exam system like ours creates is this concept that you've got one chance to get it right. You better get it right the first time. And whatever you achieve in the first attempt at doing this defines you. So I write my matric exam. Yeah. Whatever mark I get for matric, that's what defines me as an academic.
Well, of course, the education system, I believe, has always been focused towards a mass production line environment, and that's how education started for 100, 200 years ago. But I think that fear of failure is just that's not really the correct way to do it. There's no such thing as failure when it comes to creativity. One person's product is somebody else's treasure, and with making things, since when is anything wrong? It's either just too big or too small, or the wrong color, or the wrong material, or the wrong wood, or this can be higher or lower. And as we move into the new world, Internet of Things is launching or rushing down on us. But I believe that custom design and personalization will outperform any internet-based activity, because I don't think computers and AI have worked out what personalization and customization actually is.
If we look at these lists that come out of the jobs that didn't exist 20 years ago that exist now, or the jobs that are likely to exist in 20 years' time that don't exist now, there seems to me to be thread or a theme running through that, and that's the theme of creativity, that theme of you spoke about customization. I absolutely agree with you that and in fact that's where education has failed to move up until now. You know, there have been lots of promises of that, but I don't think we've had that perfect storm of technology in education and pedagogy, thinking about how children learn, to actually disrupt education. So if you look at a classroom today and you look at what a classroom looked like 50 years ago, you see very little actual difference in the approach of the teacher, in what's in the classroom, in how the classroom or a school works. You know, the bell rings, I go to my next class. The bell rings, I go to my next class. There's no deep learning going on. And when it comes to entrepreneurship, I think that deep learning is the key. You know, that failure is important, because as long as you have the systems in place to say, and you spoke about, you know, I use the word iteration. So we tried this. Okay, that was interesting. Let's iterate this. Let's go back and try and make it better. Let's go back and change something on it, change the color, change the shape, see whether that works better. Now, there's no time within the normal school curriculum for that kind of deep iteration to take place.
Yeah, you raise an interesting point, but there are some simple steps that are really guaranteed success. So with children, I believe, and I've seen it with many of my clients when they buy machines, you've got the grandmother, the mother, the father, and the daughter there, and it's a family affair. And there are a few simple things you can do to really inspire youngsters, because they're not really going to get it from their parents, because entrepreneurship is not really ingrained in South African society. Still not in 2021. So
unpack that a bit for me, Warwick. Why do you say we're not
because if I say to children, to a child or somebody, go to your home, bring me a breadboard, and we are going to customize it with a beautiful Mother's Day message, that is guaranteed to be success. And then you're going to get buy-in from zero to hero of the whole family about how wonderful Johnny is. But really, it's actually quite a straightforward process. But the affirmation should really come early on. You know, small bits of success. A wooden spoon label, like a soup ladle, can be "I love mom" or something. You know, the dad's hammer in the workshop. There are so many things that just demonstrate that if they get the affirmation, they're one step away from entrepreneurship.
So I read a very interesting article a couple of years ago in the Business Review about upcycling. And so taking something like a hammer, taking something like a spoon, which is just a normal object that there are thousands of. Yes. They're cookie cutter, yes. They're all the same shape and size, yes. And then doing something with that to make it more desirable, to make it something that and so when we start talking about entrepreneurship in school and teaching entrepreneurship to children, it's actually, and if I think about it, you know, we're going to be doing it from grade 6 to grade 9. And obviously, my expectation is each year they're going to be doing an entrepreneurship project. It has to become more and more sophisticated as they move up. You know, so I'm quite happy with the grade 6 kids saying, all right, let's take an everyday, you know, that's a great project to give kids. Take an everyday object, figure out a way to upcycle this so that other people will want to pay money for that thing. And the pay money part is also quite interesting, because when they do the cookies, when they do the muffins, I think we were chatting about that. You know, the kids, they look, mom will say, okay, we'll make cookies, we'll help you out, we'll make cookies. All right. So they get all the ingredients out of the cupboard, or maybe mom goes down to Checkers, buys the ingredients. They make the cookies. Mom and sister and everybody are helping make the cookies. Child takes that to the school, and they've decided now to sell their cookies for 5 Rand.
Yes.
Okay. What they haven't figured out is that the ingredients cost 6.50 Rand.
That's right.
So that's not on top, you know, just because you're not counting the cost of the materials.
Absolutely. So the life lesson in that for any child or any adult is to value your time, and the relationship between time, materials, and the product that you're going to sell is actually so important. Of course, it will play itself out when eventually somebody pays for it, and that's the ultimate recognition, when somebody has decided that they want to buy your product, whether it's R2, 22 Rand, or 200 Rand.
Correct. I want to just say to the people who've joined us on the webinar this evening, there is a question section. So if you've got questions, you want to throw your questions into that question section, please feel free to do so. I'm not going to promise that Warwick or I are going to have the time this evening to answer those questions, but we certainly will make an effort, or evolv will make an effort to get back to you on some of your questions. I also want to say that I want to hone in at the end on, okay, so what does a school do? How does a school like evolv? Why did we spend money on buying a laser printer from you guys? Why did we spend money on the cardboard crease cutter? What was the vision that we saw? And in fact, I remember the day I actually came to your place, and I was looking at the machines, and I'd come to buy a laser.
Yes.
And you convinced me to buy the cardboard creaser as well. And that was when we first spoke about the possibility of us having this conversation on a webinar. And it was the ability to see the possibilities for our children, because it doesn't make sense in a school to spend any money on resources unless you can make an argument for why there's an educational purpose. Now, I mean, in your space, it's about you're selling a machine to that family because that family want to earn a living using that machine, and you've got a huge variety of stuff that people can buy at your place, to make t-shirts and cups and personalize all kinds of things. But that family buying that first laser cutter, significant family investment. Okay, what are you saying if I'm now saying to my children, we've got one of those, I'm going to let you design and prototype on that thing?
So you haven't really provided the spark. You've just actually put the toolbox on the floor
at the moment. Yes.
So the spark has to come from all sorts of things. So I was in your your office here, and I looked at a little pencil box on the desk that had dovetail edges. It was round here, and I said to your staff here, now there is a project. Let's do some replacement. Let's introduce, maybe if it overflows to entrepreneurship, we're going to do less importing in South Africa. We're going to do more micro manufacturing. There is that product. We bought it from somewhere, but we can make that for maybe 5 Rand material cost. It's on the desk there. It's the perfect laser project. And so replacement stuff that you use is a really good way to start.
I love that. I love that. I love that idea. So it's not just about, let's see what's in the kitchen and put a mom's name on it.
No.
It's also about, let's see what's in the kitchen. Let's see whether we can make that thing for cheaper. And so we would then be able to compete in the marketplace.
And you take I was looking at your logo, and I took a photograph there, because that's a very laserable product here.
Yes.
And maybe your own internal competition could be run where people could just see how they could laser it and then just cut it out. And yes, it wouldn't be 3-dimensional. It would be just a flat surface. But that's your logo, and they can have it up at home. They made that.
I beg to differ, Warwick. I mean, one of the things that's fascinated me about, as I've explored what can be done on a laser, is that ability to 3-dimensionalize.
Yes, to an extent.
You cut the different layers.
Oh yes, so you build it up
you
here.
Put the layers together like that.
So the additive layering, absolutely right.
And I would argue that doing that in some of the wood materials, for example, is a lot cheaper than printing that on a 3D printer.
Absolutely.
With PLC and different plastics. Okay, so I like the spark idea. So the idea of saying, let's see what we already spend money on and see whether we can't make it cheaper and make it better. Okay.
Yeah, even if they just use it at home, if they use it at home on their desk.
Yeah, the entrepreneurship part of that is I'm saving my own money by making it rather than buying it. Okay,
right.
But obviously when I want to do this in evolv, we've got an online shop. So the whole idea is that our kids will design things.
Okay.
We will put them on the shop for sale.
Right. So it raises, if I can draw on the experience of the families that I've dealt with here, is that not everybody can be the designer and the manufacturer and the person who buys the materials and the seller, etc., etc. And you'll find people putting up their hands in a sort of like in a gestural way that says, I'm the designer and I'm the manufacturer. And you shouldn't really be afraid that not everybody is going to design something, because some guy is going to be the major designer and somebody is going to be the major online manipulator, search engine, keywords, etc., but they're still a team. And collaboration, whether it's by Zoom or it's the modern world.
We use
collaboration. So the projects are.
Now again, you know, you're kind of, it's like two minds with one thought. So the whole, you know, I hate group work. The definition of group work for me is the group watching someone work.
Yeah, the willing workhorse.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's always an unfair distribution of workload in group work. So when we do group work, first of all, children don't naturally know how to work in a group. Okay. So you've got to teach them the skills. You've got to teach them listening. You've got to teach them how to give and take feedback. You've got to teach them, you know, how to take turns. You've got to teach them how to iterate and build from what others are telling them, and how to listen, very importantly. So when we look at how we would want to do this, you know, and what I've succeeded with before is we use what's called a swim chart. So on this track, we have the designer. On this track, we have the marketing person. On this track, we have the materials research, whatever person. On this track, we have the salesperson. Okay. And and then you say that you actually define the role of that one. These are the 5 things that kid who's doing the marketing has to get right in order for us to say he's mastered the art of marketing, or she's mastered the art of marketing. And then the design is on a different track. And I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't. You do want them to learn about each other's track.
Absolutely, the building blocks. Somebody who's in marketing must understand the design process.
Correct.
And how long things take.
Correct.
And have some sort of like intuitive understanding of the time relationship, the material relationship. Otherwise, you're going to get projects that will just never, will probably won't work, or will be less effective. So what I've also seen is that children and families here, they become sort of intellectually lazy. They just know what they're good at, and they become good at it, but they don't really want to do much more, step out of those lines there. And in an entrepreneurial environment here, if you're not,
there can't be boundaries.
You can't be boundaries. So you can do a master there, and you've got to have your building blocks. You've got your toolbox needs more than a screwdriver, your personal toolbox.
So to teach, again, back to the top, I'm just conscious that we've built this as how to teach entrepreneurship meaningfully, or how to teach children entrepreneurship by making them become entrepreneurs. And so when I mention the shop, for me, there's in this entrepreneurship program of our school, there's a series of areas of expertise that a child must at least get some exposure to. So there's the area of materials, and what I love about it is that it integrates with the rest of the curriculum well, you know. So I know, for example, in natural sciences in grade 7, they learn about the properties of materials. They learn, you know, what are the properties of plastic, what are the properties of metal, what are the properties of wood, because when you're deciding what material you want to make your device out of, you're gonna say, well,
different costs and different machines.
Cost, but there's also will this stand up to heat?
Absolutely.
Is this bendable? Is it firm? You know, what type of thing? Our 3D printer here prints in all kinds of materials. It prints in wood, it prints in carbon fiber, it prints in high temperature plastics, normal plastic. Obviously, there are different pricings around those different items. When I think about the UV printer system that you sell, you know, the fact that it can print on glass, it can print on wood, it can print on leather, it can, you know, it opens up the opportunity to get children to learn something meaningful about science.
Yeah, absolutely.
While they're also learning something about entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
And then for me, the next step is to say, okay, so you've got that side of things, but you've also got how does marketing work? You know, how do you make them look?
So the joy of having what we call subtractive manufacturing, which is a block of wood or a sheet here, and then eventually morphs or evolves into something you can touch and feel, and then you can hopefully sell it, is really fantastic. The online shop here is a slow process, and you're not really getting good feedback. there really is no shortcut to an open day, and people walking past, do they even look at your stand? You know, what about actually, are you just going to stand there on your phone, or are you actually going to make eye contact with the clients? There's a whole lot more to entrepreneurship than just having a sort of like a product. The product will work.
They can buy.
The product will work, but the whole environment has to be correct. You see?
So, now, as you know, we're an online school.
Yeah.
So, and our students are scattered all over the country, and
yes, but I was talking about the concept of prototyping to get to the final product quicker.
I like what you're saying. So, what our concept here is children will go through this design process. They'll learn about design theory and design thinking. They will then work in a team to identify a product that they think they can make inroads into the market. Okay. They will do market research to say, are there other, like your pencil box that you spoke to, what makes that pencil box nice? Can we make it nicer? Can we personalize it? Can we change something in this box? Okay. To compete with the person who's selling that kind of box. Okay. And then they've got to go through this process of creating their prototype. Now, obviously I can't have 440 children arriving at the office, especially if they live in Portugal, which one of my students does. You know, they can't arrive at this office to actually make it. So the idea is we'll put cameras into our Imagineering lab. The children will create the files that need to be made, that need to be put onto the machine to be made. The file for the cardboard cutter, the file for the 3D printer, the printer, the UV printer, the whole toot. And we will actually manufacture it, and they can watch their items being manufactured. And then we send 5 of those home to the children. So they get their prototypes mailed to them. Okay. And the idea then is they've got to take those prototypes and they've got to give them to people.
Yeah.
And they've got to say, use this for me.
Right.
Tell me if you like it. Tell me, and don't just, you know, what we don't want them to do is just give it to their.
You mean
you can't just give it to mom who says, "Oh dear, this is lovely," because moms always love what their children make. I remember woodwork from when I was at school. I think my thing looked like that. Mom still thought it was brilliant. They've got to get meaningful feedback.
Right.
They've got to post that feedback as part of their assessment. So they've actually got to say, you know, if I'm saying you're mastering entrepreneurship, I want to see, did you elicit good feedback?
Yeah.
And then did you redesign based on that feedback?
Of course.
I think you want to jump in there.
No, that's absolutely right. The iteration, the evolving process, problem solving, whether it's entrepreneurial problem solving or design problem solving or just that's what it is. All the famous entrepreneurs of eBay, they say there's never the perfect product. And you can't wait for the Rolls Royce. You have to start somewhere. You have to get feedback and build up. The building blocks are the product evolution. The famous challenge for young entrepreneurs in the software world is that they're always trying to have the best product. And it never gets to market. You're never getting conscious feedback. Nobody's ever bought the product. Oh, yes, they may have given away 50 copies or whatever it is, but they haven't really got the feedback, you see.
Exactly. And then also, if it's not that first product that we're going to put on the shop, it's that iterated version that we put on the shop. But that doesn't stop there. So again, like I said earlier, you know, we've got grade 6 to grade 9. Complexity of the product that you're designing is the one thing. But then also the degree to which you collaborate. You know, I might say to a grade 6 child, find something in the house, upcycle it. It doesn't matter that you haven't gone through the full iteration process. There's certain aspects of entrepreneurship that I want you to learn at a grade 6 level. If you happen to be a bright spark and you see an amazing idea and you want to run with it, fine. I'm not going to stand in your way. Okay, but you know, we've got our curriculum, we've got our pacing guide. We know that at a grade 6 level, this is what entrepreneurship looks like for us. This is what we want children to master. Okay, grade 7, we up our game a bit, you know. So you're gonna, as a youngster in Evolv Online, you're gonna go through this cycle multiple years. It's not just we're now doing market day. And in fact, our entrepreneurship project will start at the beginning of the second term and run for the rest of the year. So it's not a case of we just have a little block. You have one go at it End of story.
Well, the spark doesn't die out. So once
Yes.
you've got the spark here, it's just self-combusting. It just proliferates. You will have to restrain
Our
the
kids.
children. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to get 10 ideas that they want us to
Absolutely.
prototype.
And then they'll be on Google Images looking at laser gifts and whatever, or they'll be bringing in their dog tag and they're lasering the dog's name on the tag, or they'll be doing so many things. So many things. I think when I spoke to you earlier on, I said that once they have an idea of a laser, sort of like challenging children to find out what they see in your office that can be cut or made, what they see at the shopping mall, because if they look carefully, they'll see what lasers can do. And that is so inspirational, because when you can see what they can do, well, then you're one step away from seeing what you can do differently. But if you can't see what it can do, you can't really iterate the idea.
You know, I'm an English teacher, and you remind me of when film study was introduced into the English curriculum for the first time. And, you know, as young English teachers, we then had to work out, how do we teach film study to kids? And the answer was, you start with the vocabulary. You start with the language of film. So, you know, shot, camera angle, point of view, camera movement, mise en scène, the whole thing. But what I always found phenomenal is when we had taught children that language, they couldn't see a film in the same way again. I'm also reminded about the time I discovered user experience design. I was quite far along in my age before that idea. I actually went on a trip to Spain, and we went to La Sangria, I'm going to get it wrong, La Sangria de Familia, the famous cathedral by Gaudi. And the house, the block of flats that he designed. And he was the first person to start using ergonomic design. So he shaped the handles of doors so that they fit hands, and, you know, that kind of thing. And once you discover the words of film, once you discover the language of entrepreneurship, I believe, you know, you talk about walking around a shopping center and seeing, oh, that was laser cut. Understanding that process, understanding, oh, that was, you know, so with the creaser cutter machine, the whole idea is you go through the steps, you go through the design step, you go through a packaging design step. You know, how am I going to present this thing? What parcel? And of course, with the creaser cutter machine, you can create your own packaging, and it doesn't have to be a box.
Well, I'm sure many of your children have got younger kids, so you're one step away from a party box with their name cut out on the box. And I can show you that mom or dad has gone around and bought 30 or 40 or 50 of those things. Little party boxes. But they haven't got Johnny's name and 7 or 8 or whatever. Absolutely, whatever. They haven't got that information. See? So that's where you can use.
If any of the kids are listening tonight, I mean, there's a phenomenal opportunity.
Everybody's got birthdays.
Party design. Everybody's got birthdays.
Yeah.
You know, can I design a party? You know, something to do with a party. Can I do that?
What you could also tell.
I must tell you though, Warwick, speaking to you, I can't wait to hear what the kids come up with. I mean,
well, here's an idea. I just thought of it. I was just talking to you. So Dad throws away his pair of leather shoes here. We'll say, Dad, next time you throw it away, I'm going to take the laser and I'm going to turn that into sandals, and I've got little cutouts, airy, sort of like ventilation cutouts. Because if you look closely in some shoe shops here, you'll see all those little holes come from a laser. So your next shoe manufacturer in South Africa in 20 years' time could be the student who cut out holes in leather shoes.
Talk to me a little bit about micro manufacturing. I don't think you know, what would you say to an audience about what is micro manufacturing?
So micro manufacturing is well, South African or entrepreneurs today entrepreneurs of 10 years ago could only dream of what's available today. What you can make in your garage at the moment here with those two machines would just be less than one car. Add a couple of machines here, and you've got the most amazing toolbox. Not a hammer and spanner, but I'm talking about.
I actually have a hammer and spanner in my lab as well.
The entrepreneurial teambox, the toolbox here.
Right.
And so micro manufacturing is just that. You're using not necessarily micro as in microcomputer in the old-fashioned term of computers, but you're able to make so many things at home. And that's where the future is going to. You know, whether it's they talk about people working from home on offices. No. Micro manufacturing is at home.
In
fact, anybody who, generally speaking, makes signage for businesses or rubber stamps for businesses, or they make it at home.
Is there enough volume in micro manufacturing to actually earn a living out of it? That's the question.
The only thing I say to somebody with a laser is that you're not going to pay for the holiday house from your laser. Okay, because it's the toolbox with one tool. You've got 2 tools here. You can go up to 7, 8, 9. Once you've got the 7 or 8 or 9 tools, you can take on any established company, because most established companies do not have any entrepreneurial vision. They're not trying to listen to the clients. They're trying to produce 500, 600, or 1,000, whereas you're trying to listen to having a customized badge for an event day. That's where it's going to short-run production. Micro manufacturing is short-run production.
Because it is the case that market exists around personalization.
Of course.
I'm having I hear that my dad's having a conference at his work.
Absolutely.
I'm going to offer to make all the badges for that conference, and if they send me the names, I'll cut them out of
it doesn't matter.
and away you go.
If it's his 70th birthday or 50th birthday, blank wine bottles, laser engraved, happy 50th, whatever it is, I can tell you one thing, that every child or person who's made their parents a bottle with their name on it, it'll never get drunk. It'll never get thrown away. It'll be there in 30 years' time.
Yeah. Oh, so okay. So where I was going with the micro manufacturing thing is, I'm not particularly
not the customization.
Yeah.
But so the short run is just repetition. So if you've got, I'll give you an example. One of my clients, it's a straightforward idea. It just needed a bit of originality. They went and researched every cup of victory of every provincial rugby team. Then they soaked off the labels and then engraved all the victories of the Bulls and the Lions year by year by year, right down to 1890. Wow, he's almost retired just from doing wine bottles with the favorite sports teams on that bottle. There's thousands of people who want mementos for the Bulls and mementos for the Sharks, mementos from the Stormers.
Yes.
I mean,
and again,
that's short run, right?
That's short run, but it's also so. I was having a conversation with my head of academics earlier about. We were talking about. We're actually talking about the curriculum, and well, actually, I'm wrong. I was having a conversation with the head of marketing in our brand, and we were talking about diaries. And one of the things that organizations like ours that buy volume find as a problem is the wastage around over ordering or under. So you have this problem of at the beginning of the year I'm enrolling kids. I don't know exactly how many children I'm going to have. So just based on past trends, I reckon I need to buy 500 diaries. I think I'll have enough diaries for all the kids and maybe 20 or 30 spare in case we get more kids during the year. And then they discovered that there's only 420 kids, and now I'm stuck with 80 diaries that they're diaries. After this year is gone, the diary is wasted. There's nothing I can do with that device. And the thing that attracts me to micro manufacturing is the kind of just in time and the just enough.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I don't invest my capital in wine bottles until I have the order for it.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
And only once I have the money in the bank,
absolutely,
do I actually produce the goods, kind of thing. You pay me for here's my shop. You can buy this bottle. It's got all the Bulls victories on it.
Absolutely.
But pay me the money and you'll get the bottle.
Absolutely.
Not there's 10 bottles on a shelf. I hope somebody buys them.
And in the process, the entrepreneur learns that vested interests and hobbies and emotional attachment has a price premium.
Yes, you can charge more for that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not quite sure how much time we got left. We've got about 20 minutes left, Warwick. So, and I wanted to ask. I know Marie is listening in. And we can't hear the microphone. The speakers are outside. But if Marie wants to pop in at any minute with any questions that she thinks are super interesting that Warwick and I could apply our minds to, I'm very happy to.
Here she comes.
Guys, we're actually sitting in the studio at the evolv Online Innovation Hub. It's the most awesome space. Thanks, Cams. And so, well, now I can actually see what we look like, which is a bit scary. Let's just switch the sound off. Okay, so Excuse me while I quickly work out how to use Camry's computer. Right. So there's a question here saying entrepreneurship is full of failure and hardship. This is where we lose a lot of people in accessing new business. How do we teach our kids to dealing with this, especially when they're high performers and not used to failures? That's from Yaku. I think that's a great question. I mean, that's more an educated question than an entrepreneur question, because it's about how do you teach the children to fall down and get up again. Okay. I mean, you started your own company. I've read lots of books about entrepreneurs who say I failed 40 times before I succeeded. I mean, what was your experience around that? Let's start.
I mean, it's no different to being tackled in rugby. You didn't make it to the line, you had to get up and carry on. So that's yeah, it's failure it's not failure. It's just didn't work. It's part of your building block.
So now Yaku is actually saying, okay, so the problem here is the child's a high performer and they're used to success. Okay.
Yeah.
They're not used to failing. And Yaku, I wanted to say that one of the things that we experience as teachers is that in a traditional school environment where the measure of success is the marks you get generally, or being chosen for the first team, or there's this sort of very high stakes, you made it or you didn't. What's missing is the concept of yet. Carol Dweck wrote a fantastic book called Growth Mindset, and I know the concept of growth mindset has taken hold in the business world as well. And the idea behind well, one of the words that we use in evolv Online is the word yet. Use that word quite seriously. It's not that you didn't succeed, it's that you haven't succeeded yet.
Yes, I think sure, and probably becomes more of a challenge for older children. But I've yet to see a 4-year-old who fails at anything.
You're right.
A 5-year-old
now
fails at anything.
Just unpack that a bit for me.
Well, because everything to them is an adventure.
Okay.
Life's an adventure. I mean, schools are not great at mastering or encouraging creativity, because we have to get onto that treadmill of marks and the A-list or the whatever it is. We just we sort of like squash it very well. So teaching the role. The one way to get around that is to make something that they've made for themselves, which is not measurable against anybody else. You must remove the measurability of the 18,
the comparison.
So one person's going to the pencil box, somebody else is going to do this. Yeah, it's theirs.
It's not who makes the best pencil box. Did you make? I would say to Yaku, from an educational perspective, Yaku, the trick that I've found is important is this, and you're quite right. The late great Sir Ken Robinson.
Yeah, that's where I got it from.
Yeah,
I was about to tell you the nativity story.
Yes,
you remember that nativity story?
I do, but maybe just for our audience.
Well, so the kids are going to a nativity show there, and his kids in the show, and he says, and so Ken says, well, how did it go? And he says, high five, great, and meanwhile, he had the part here, and frankincense and myrrh, and he had to say, well, somebody sent the myrrhs. And then the child says, Frank sent this, not frankincense, but he thought that he had won.
Yes.
Failure is not an option to a 5-year-old.
So you raise an important point. It's because it's about, and this is critical in this case where children are high performers, they have high expectations for themselves. They often define failure. They don't get necessarily told they failed. They believe they failed. Sometimes it is because they're told they failed. Well, marks always tells you whether you passed or failed if you go in marks post. So that kid, it didn't matter. The measure of success was not whether I got the words right. The measure of success was whether I said something.
Yeah.
On now when I take this question and when I say, how do I teach a high performer to fail? If they're a high performer, there's a very good chance that you're going to be able to move them into what we call metacognitive thinking. Okay, so there's teachers have their own language, and we talk about something called a taxonomy of learning. And when we generally speak about taxonomies of learning, we're talking about how difficult, in the basis terms, how difficult is this question? Do I just need to remember the answer? Do I need to use the answer in some way? Do I need to make up my own answer? So we talk about levels of difficulty, and that's a taxonomy. But I like a different taxonomy of learning. So I like that part of the taxonomy, but I also like this taxonomy by a chap called Mazzano, where he talks about, it's not just about the cognitive system, the cognitive difficulty of something. It's also about the self system and the metacognitive. The self system speaks about how do I feel about this? What emotions do I experience when I'm trying to learn history? Am I afraid of my teacher, therefore I'm not going to study very well? But the metacognitive, and this is the true answer, I think, to Jako's question, is the metacognitive is about, can I analyze my thinking? So when I fail, can I be led through a process of saying, that's interesting, I failed. Can I figure out why?
Yep.
Can I figure out what I would do differently next time? And I wanted to also say this to Jako. What we find as teachers is the minute you start taking children out of the comfort zone of, here is what you have to learn, and then you're going to get a test that will test whether you learned that. And we are going to measure the percentage of learning that has taken place. And we're going to then give you a mark that says that's the percentage of learning that has taken place. Now, when you take them out of that space and you say, you can't fail the entrepreneurship module. You can't, okay? We want to see you learn these skills.
Yep.
We want to see you understand these concepts, market need, whatever it is, and we want to see you make an effort to apply what you've learned to produce something. And when you take children into a world where the measure is a project, where it's something that they create, you often find the kids that do badly in the marks do brilliantly at that. Sure. I remember I used to teach app development. And I want to say for the parents who may be listening, I know we've been speaking about the laser cutter this and the carbon creaser, but we're also looking at the whole coding side of things. There's entrepreneurial opportunities within coding and that side of things as well. So we're not going to neglect that. But the minute you take them out of the safety of, as long as I learn the right things, as long as I know the 5 definitions, I will get the marks and therefore succeed. And you say, actually, there's no right. Is what you do.
So you can go to your students and say, have you any of you got photographs on your cell phone? Of course they've got photographs. Well, let's deep etch a photograph of your dog or your family or your mom or whatever, and let's start investigating photography, but using the laser. It doesn't have to be the laser. The laser is just a tool in the toolbox.
Correct.
And you may find that there's a photographer lurking there. And if you've got stuff on your cell phone, that means something to them. You're one step away. You already got half the spark, because you're not saying go out and take a photograph. It's on their cell phone for a reason.
Right. So you've already been motivated to take that picture for a purpose.
Absolutely.
Explore that.
Explore that.
Go metacognitive about that.
Absolutely.
I see as I think it's Zali Knight has asked a couple of questions that I think are quite interesting. The one is about I have to ask then, do the learners get exposed to design principles before they implement their entrepreneurship skills? My answer is yes. Yes, in the sense that school perspective. So it may not happen like that in the real world, but in a school perspective, one of the building blocks for teaching entrepreneurship is teaching design theory and teaching the steps of the iteration, the prototyping, the increasing, the improving. All of that process in design theory is a critical building block for children if you want them to get to entrepreneurship. Are you thinking that that's not as critical?
I'm reminded of Elon Musk, who says that if I want to teach my kids how to use a spanner or a toolbox, I'm not going to say a spanner does this and a hammer does that.
No.
I'm going to take the engine and say, we're going to disassemble this engine. And we're going to use a whole bunch of tools. So let's get back to your photograph now. Your photograph on the cell phone. Now they've got the photograph. Now we're going to address design, but a different way. We're going to say, are we going to cut out this image? Are we going to deep etch it? Are we going to shade it? Are we going to do that? But it's on their photograph. It's not out of a book. You're experimenting in real terms.
I get you what you're saying, Warwick. But and again, I think that there's nothing, we're not in contradiction with one another, but one of the things that makes education different from learning.
Yes.
Because what I find fascinating is that you send kids to school, they learn a lot.
Yeah.
Not so sure they got educated, but they certainly learned
Absolutely.
a lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And there's a lot of learning that happens at schools that has nothing to do with the curriculum. There's nothing to do with the sort of formal what we're trying to teach them.
Wow.
So for me, the whole issue of this question is, and the idea of I give a kid a spanner, let's see what he can do with the spanner. You will learn more. That discovery learning is a
Yes.
critical thing, but if we're going to be doing education, then what we need to have is a system. What we need to have is a process. So in our case, we use something called the 5 facets of understanding.
Okay.
It was developed by the Aeronautical Engineering department at MIT. And it's a process of understanding the path of learning for children. Now, it's not one that says, I'm going to teach you what the spanner does before. But if I do teach you what the spanner does, or if I find a way for you to explore what the spanner does, I should then be able to test you on what's a spanner. Rather than teaching you a spanner is this and it has these 5 characteristics. I'm wondering if we just went down a rabbit hole there.
If I could just add one thing here, is that there could be 100 design techniques to improve that photograph, and they will come up with 2 or 3, and then maybe your design can kick in to say, right, you guys have got to, you're on the first lap here. Now we're going to explore another 50 design things, which I'm going to teach you. But these kids can play around themselves to an extent. Correct. And then you can kick in and accelerate it.
And that's what performance-based assessment is about. Okay. It's I don't teach a child, I don't test a child singing by saying, now sing this song to me.
Right.
I test a child singing by saying, I expect you to find a choir to be part of and to invite me to a performance of that choir, and then I'll measure your singing at the performance when it's a real world and it's a real thing. I saw this at a school in Boston.
Wow.
It was the most amazing approach. But there is a question here that I do want to answer straight away. It's only fair. Lesedi asks, where do I purchase those laser printers? That's my son right there. I've got the CEO of Perfect Laser sitting next to me. Perfect Laser, South African company. They do have branches all over South Africa. I know you've got a great branch here in Johannesburg because that's where in the Randburg area.
Ferndale, yes.
But what we will do is for the people who did attend our webinar this evening, we will send out a post webinar email, and we'll put your contact details in that email so that look, there are different sizes, and I know that you've got different choices. So it does, Lesedi, to some extent, depend on what your pocket.
I mean, there's an interesting question on its own here, because we have this discussion: what size laser should I buy? Yes. And I say, guys, 2 small lasers will always outperform 1 big laser.
Right.
And you can't be testing, prototyping, designing, manufacturing on 1 cutting instrument. It's like having 1 pair of scissors if you're running a clothing factory. It's not going to work.
Got you. Yeah.
So I look forward to speaking to anybody who wants to find out more.
We will get you. We'll get the details for Warwick to you so that you can chat to him. And then I do also want to jump back to this question, Bazali, because it's about picking the perfect team.
Right.
Because in a school, what often happens is we say you, and you. You're in a team. Now, at evolv, our classes are small. Okay, we have a goal of not having more than 12 kids in our foundation phase class and not more than 14 in our senior phase and intermediate phase classes. And that's because there's this mix between live learning and learning on your own. We are a homeschool provider.
Okay.
So children only spend 20% of their time in a class. The other 80% of the time they're responsible for their own learning. They're following the program. And so the limits of the team in this entrepreneurship project are specifically the limits of the group that you're in, so that you won't be able in a school context to necessarily pick the perfect team. That's not true for an entrepreneur necessarily. And one of the things I've loved about starting evolv Online is there's no legacy staff. I literally could go out and headhunt the people I wanted to have as my teachers. I mean, for principals, that's
quite a bonus.
That is like the most amazing thing. I see Melanie's asked about what are the most in qualities you need to be an entrepreneur.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going. Why? Persistence.
Persistence.
Absolutely. Persistence. Yeah.
Willingness to pick yourself up when you fail.
Listen, put it out there and get feedback.
Yeah, being able to get feedback, being able to listen. These are good qualities. And then I'm just checking. The question about whether you need to buy them. I'm not 100% sure if you mean do you need to buy the you certainly don't need to go and buy a laser printer to be in the entrepreneurship course. We've invested in those for our children already. But you do, your child will, so built into the pricing of Evolv Online is this entrepreneurship module. So and we will limit what materials children can use in our entrepreneurship model by what we've budgeted to give them access to.
Sure.
So the kids, and that's an important entrepreneurial thing as well. You will have a budget.
Absolutely.
You can't spend more than
Yes.
X, and the laser cutter is X amount. To use a laser cutter is X amount.
Of course.
Per minute. It costs you 6 minutes per minute.
Absolutely.
Or whatever to use the laser cutter. I was at your offices the other day doing some advanced training, and they actually gave me the figures for if a person's using this laser, this is what it costs in terms of the tube and that sort of thing. Yeah. Last words, Warwick.
Yes.
We've run out of time. We've got a bunch of people listening in. What would you say to them about you've got a child at home? Where do I start as a parent in trying to get my child to think entrepreneurially?
I'm a little bit old-fashioned, so I think that having your child do a Saturday morning job is really quite important. It teaches you to get there on time, to look the part, be useful, listen, learn, and watch. So the trickle down of families teaching any school, if society doesn't trickle down to the children, you've got your back, you've got your plate full trying to encourage entrepreneurship because it hasn't been exposed around the dining room table or the TV set or whatever it is.
We don't teach our children these things.
Right. So yeah, just
I also think you said something earlier when we were talking outside about keep your eyes open.
Absolutely.
You've said this a couple of times.
Yeah.
That was done with the laser. That was done with the laser. That was done with the laser. Just look for the opportunities. So having discussions with your kids at the table about what opportunities did you see.
But isn't that just a story about entrepreneurship? If you're just looking, if you've got the machine, it doesn't matter whether you're 12 or 52. If you've got a skill, you've got to look for opportunities. Whether you're reading online about who needs an engineer, or you're looking to see what people are making, because if they're making it and it's in somewhere for sale, then somebody wants it. Yeah. So you could walk around Rosebank Market and you will miss it. For every one you'll find, you'll miss it. So you'd have to look carefully to see whether somebody is making cutout flowers or putting engraving onto leather wallets or actually making gifts here. You need to look. And that's part of the process of entrepreneurship. You just need to look and expand your vision. You can't be tunnel vision. You can't come with your own ideas. You must
see what you can see in society and build on.
It was. We have to go back hundreds of years to Isaac Newton. He said he didn't invent all these laws. He was lucky enough to stand on the shoulders of others. Correct. So that's what entrepreneurship is.
So I think you're saying a very important thing is you don't have to start with a blank slate.
No.
You can look at what's around you in the world and you can then decide from there. We do have to wrap up now.
Okay.
I want to say a huge thank you for the time you've given us this evening.
It's a pleasure.
For the opportunity for us to have this conversation. At evolv, we've got this tagline, learn without limits.
Excellent.
And the whole idea behind a mastery-based approach to learning, which is the way we go about things, is that concept of yet. So, and what I'm really looking forward to with the entrepreneurship module is not just what do our kids do this year, but how do our kids grow over multiple years. Absolutely. As they become more and more sophisticated in their use of the language of entrepreneurship. Folks, thank you so much for the time you've spent with us this evening. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. We've certainly had a great time chatting.
Thank you.
And there will be more webinars in the future. I know we've got a webinar coming up with an expert in America on homeschooling. She's going to be joining us and talking about, you know, how you set up the perfect home environment, or how she's found a way to set up the perfect environment. And we also have the designer of the pop-up dungeon app, which we're using to teach literature in evolv. He's coming on board to talk about pop-up dungeon with our kids. It's a great game that kids can use to learn about character and theme and that sort of thing. So thanks so much for your time, and I hope you have a great evening, and thank you for joining us.